Hello and welcome back. This is Total OS Today, Total Operating Systems Today, technology for beginners and beyond. Well, speaking of operating systems, I have with me a very, very special guest all the way from the UK. He is the founder of something called Ubuntu Mate. His name is Martin Wimpress. And Martin, of course, we all know what UK stands for. It stands for Ubuntu Kingdom.
Oh, very good.
Yes, sir, I actually told that joke to Popey. So next time you see Alan, tell him I say hello.
I will do.
All right, so are you actually the single person who is responsible or a co-founder? How does this work?
I'm the co-founder, so myself and Alan Pope. Well, Alan Pope actually is responsible for the inception of the idea, really. I'm an upstream Mate developer and also an Arch Linux trusted user, and I was
Ah,
doing most of my Mate development work in the Arch user space.
okay.
And I was interviewed on the Ubuntu UK podcast, and Alan was asking about the state of Mate in Ubuntu, and was a bit surprised when I told him that it was a bit broken in Ubuntu at that time and it didn't work very well. And about a week or so after I'd recorded that podcast with him, he sent me an email with a link to an ISO image and said, I've made a version of Ubuntu with the Mate desktop embedded. And I had a little tinker with that, and that was just enough to get me interested in taking it further.
Oh, very, very nice. Now, I have to ask you, why did you create it? And I think it has to do something with your wife. This is why we have Ubuntu. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, so it's two parts actually. The reason why I'm involved in Mate itself, in the Mate desktop project, is because I had put GNOME 3 on my wife's laptop,
Yeah.
and she wasn't really using the laptop a whole lot because she'd recently had a smartphone and she'd been using her smartphone for most things for a
Okay.
couple of years or so. And then one evening she wanted to sort some photos out and really couldn't get on with GNOME 3, paradigm and the changes to the file manager. So she
Right.
was quite frustrated with that. And she was running Arch on that laptop. So I hurriedly yanked GNOME 3 off
Okay.
and then put Mate on because she'd been using Ubuntu for a number of years whilst it was using the GNOME 2 implementation. So she was familiar with that. And as soon as I did
Yes.
that, she was comfortable with the computer again. So there she is. She's running Arch. She's running Mate on it, and I noticed that there were some bugs in the Mate packages on Arch, and the packaging wasn't complete. So
Okay.
I got involved in the Mate project initially to tidy up the packaging for Arch, so
Yes.
that she had a trouble-free, installation on
Sure.
Arch, and it was all about maintaining a harmonious marriage and ensuring my wife was comfortable continuing with
Uh,
Linux.
well, folks, there you have it. Ubuntu Mate, the romantic OS. Very good.
Yeah. Well, that's Mate itself, and then Ubuntu Mate followed, and that was more of the same, but mostly because of my family that I've migrated to Linux over the years were familiar with the
Right.
GNOME 2 versions of Ubuntu,
Right.
weren't happy with Unity. I tried
Yes.
running them on Arch with Mate, but that's difficult for me to maintain from a
Mm,
distance. So
right.
when Popey had this idea about an Ubuntu Mate, I thought to myself, yes, this is something I can get working for my family and can easily support them with.
Hmm.
So that's why Ubuntu Mate came about. As so all my family now run Ubuntu Mate.
There you go. It's the new standard family OS, Ubuntu Mate.
Yeah,
Why not? I
and
have to tell you,
it's good to
yeah,
have that kind of direction as well because they're not super technical
right.
users. So I've got good user stories from them about what they find easy, what they don't like, what they'd like to see added. So I
Okay.
use them to guide some of my
Okay.
initial ideas about how to improve the operating system.
That makes perfect sense. I have to tell you, back in oh, I think it was 2011, Martin, when Ubuntu switched from the GNOME 2 to Unity, and I think it was the same time when GNOME Shell or GNOME 3 came out, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
There was a bit of a controversy in the Linux community, almost to the point of hatred. I have to admit, as a Windows user at the time, I found it somewhat amusing. But I think I made a point. Look, GNOME 3 and Ubuntu Unity, at least from my perspective as a dual booter, is not that bad. However, I made a choice. I looked at both, and my channel somewhat caters mainly for beginners, which would be easier picking one, GNOME 3 or Unity, which would be easier. I chose Ubuntu Unity. Now I'm okay with Ubuntu Unity. It looks different. It may not be for absolute beginners. For absolute beginners, I would say probably Zorin, and of course yours, Ubuntu Mate, and
Hmm.
perhaps Linux Mint. I think that's a fair assessment. But tell
Hmm.
me, why is the GNOME 2 desktop, why is it still popular?
Well, I think it's still popular because people have been conditioned to using computers that use a traditional desktop metaphor
Aha.
on Windows and Mac OS and Mac OS 10 for decades. And if you're not super technical, the feedback I get is people are reluctant to have to learn a new way of interfacing with their computer in order to get things done. So I think that Ubuntu Mate and Mate, the continuation of GNOME 2, are popular because it retains that traditional desktop interface that
Mm,
people already know how to use and are comfortable with. So I
yes.
think by and large, that's why people like it. And then as time's gone on and there's been some changes in the way that Mate is put together under the hood, Mate is quite a lightweight
Yes.
desktop now. So
Yes.
for those people that want something that preserves as much of their computing resources for the applications they want to run, rather
Right.
than driving the desktop operating system, then it's becoming popular among those people as well.
Yes. There's something to be said about simplicity. I posted a video that as a dual booter between different versions of Linux and Windows 7, 8.1, and now, of course, Windows 10, I believe in the three S's: stability, speed, and special looks. Ubuntu Mate may not be as snazzy looking as, say, KDE, but it's not necessary, Martin. But it is stable. Of course, it's secure and it's fast. And for me, that's all I can ask for really in any operating system. There's something to be said about a traditional desktop with a start button. Now, of course, in Mate, you have applications, places, system. You have, I guess you can call it, three start places to go to. But I remember when I was testing Windows 8, it was completely radical, but I liked what I saw, and I predicted that this looks terrific. All that Microsoft needs is a start menu. Okay, simplistic start menu, and they would have themselves a winner. If they don't do that, it would fail. Well, sure enough, a few years later, we have now Windows 10, and I've tested on multiple machines. It works terrific. I still keep coming back to Ubuntu Mate because it is lighter, faster. It is more secure. Not that Windows 10 is totally insecure. Now there's been some issues with privacy, although when it comes to security, I believe Linux is where to go. But there's something to be said about simple, something that's maybe familiar, and something that is comfortable. And I think that may have been at least partly where GNOME 3 and Ubuntu Unity may have partly failed. It didn't bother me, but for absolute beginners, Martin, I do believe that the Ubuntu Mate fills a niche in terms of beginners or beyond who just
Mm.
want an operating system that, oh, that's applications. I know what that is. That's places, that's system. Now, of course, that can be changed. But the point is, as soon as you boot up, you're ready to go. I believe in click and go, as I call it, click and go. And I think that's why Ubuntu Mate is very, very popular. How do you see it?
Yes, there's certainly a lot of similarities in the Windows versions and Mac OS 10 to some extent, and Ubuntu Mate. They're all quite traditional in the way
Yes.
they're used, despite the recent changes that Microsoft have introduced in 8.1 and to some
Yes.
extent reverted in 10.
Okay.
But I think another reason why Ubuntu Mate is popular is for a lot of people. Ubuntu was their first Linux love, and that would have been for a lot of people when it was running GNOME 2. And for that reason, there's sort of a nostalgia to Ubuntu Mate
Oh,
and a
yes.
familiarity and a reunion with a love lost sort of thing. So
Of
I
course,
think
yes.
there's a lot of that as well going on. I mean, when the whole Unity thing landed, I wasn't too sure about Unity in its first implementation. So was actually running Ubuntu GNOME for a little while, and then
Hmm.
I switched completely to Arch Linux, and I've been running Arch Linux on my main machine for several years, and I'm quite involved in the Arch Linux community. So
Okay.
the Unity thing really sort of drove me quite far, out of the Ubuntu, community completely.
Okay.
And I've since come back and got involved as a result of Ubuntu Mate. And I suppose really I've got involved because of Mate and Alan being a devious whatnot. But yeah.
Oh, I love
Um,
Popey. Yeah, he's terrific. We've had a few conversations in the past. He's fun to talk to, sure.
yeah.
Um, so in general, I mean, you know how I love Ubuntu Mate. What has been the feedback from the community? I mean, I'm assuming it's mostly positive, right?
It has been. I've been really quite surprised about that actually. I really did make this initially. My first user of this was my father-in-law. He really wanted his original Ubuntu experience back.
Huh,
I'd got him running on Arch at the time with Mate, and
right.
that wasn't really working for him. So he was the first person I moved over, and that's really where it started. And then when I started working on the versions, I was surprised for a
Yep.
1410 version that isn't LTS, how much interest was building around it, and I was sort of seeing a lot of downloads, and
Mm,
and those have climbed and climbed and climbed. So it's being, as best as I can, track it. It's being downloaded. The desktop version, so the 32-bit and 64-bit version, is being downloaded about 1,000 times a day,
yeah.
and as those numbers were going up, I was getting increasingly surprised at the adoption rate. And I've been really, really pleasantly surprised at how well received Ubuntu Mate has been. I don't think I've seen or read a bad review, one that completely
Mm,
slates it. There's lots of critique in the reviews I've looked
sure.
at, and that's all useful stuff, and that's something you can do something with and,
Yes.
build into the next In fact, some of your videos pointed me at some issues, and I've been able to fix some things and improve some things as a result of the reviews you've done, for example.
Well, thank you.
So,
Yeah.
but it's a really great. I don't have to, then go out and even reviews of other desktop operating systems is useful for me to see
Yeah.
what people like or don't like, and you can learn from that and
Right.
improve yours because of it. So, but yeah, it's
Uh,
been very well received, and I am surprised. I imagine that
Very
will
good.
stop someday.
Well, once again, I'll say it again. Stability, speed, and special looks. In the end, for the mom and pops of the world, that's really all you need, in my opinion. Um, the only issue I had, I think you replied, I could not connect my Galaxy phone. You kindly
Mm.
replied, I had to install, oh, forgive me,
It's the
Fat
expat.
Utility,
Yeah,
exFAT. That's it, and that solved it. That's the only issue I have had.
yeah,
Um,
and that sort of made me raise my eyebrows when I saw you'd got that problem, because I thought, well, that's interesting because it works fine with my Android devices. And then I did a bit of research and found out that Samsung use exFAT as opposed to
mm,
FAT32.
okay.
So then the penny dropped, and I was like, oh, right, so there's different file system required here. And when I installed the utilities, I thought, yeah, this is it. This is this has got to be
Well,
what.
it was one of those situations where I'm testing it and I'm like, terrific. I have an Android phone based on Linux. I can't connect to Linux Ubuntu. Come on. But you, like I said, it was as soon as you posted it, I installed it. I think I had to reboot, but that solved
Yeah,
it immediately. So thank you for the feedback. It was greatly
you're
appreciated.
you're
So
most welcome.
let's see. What do I have here on my notes? Oh, so how can you compare or contrast this Mate to Linux Mint's version?
Well, they're obviously based on Mate. Linux Mint 17.2 has just adopted Mate 1.10, so has the newer version. and I'm currently in the process of moving the 1.10 version in via Debian into Ubuntu 15.10 archive. So I'm also a Debian maintainer, and I do most of my packaging work for Ubuntu Mate in Debian, and only maintain packages for Ubuntu Mate directly within Ubuntu when they're Ubuntu specific.
Okay.
So things like the theming and the settings and
Yeah.
the new welcome utility and things like that, which are very much, Ubuntu specific tools. But Mint and Ubuntu Mate are obviously both based on Ubuntu, so that's common, underpinnings. We're both using the same desktop, both using Mate. So what really distinguishes them from one another is the default theming and the themes and wallpapers that are provided. So the aesthetics, the look and feel.
Yeah, sure.
And then Ubuntu Mate is Ubuntu. So I ship the same default applications with Ubuntu Mate that stock Ubuntu comes with, by and large. There are some cases where I have to change that because some of the packages pull in far too many Unity dependencies. So, for example, I don't ship Empathy because that pulls in most of Unity 7 with it because of the package dependencies. So I use Pigeon instead. And there are other examples of where I've deviated slightly. So I moved away from Totem to VLC because the Ubuntu Mate community made it very clear they wanted VLC as the default video player.
Good choice.
But I ship all of the, the usual Ubuntu utilities and tools. So the update manager, the software updater, the repository managers, until recently the software center and the startup disk creator. So it is Ubuntu, whereas Mint has its own rich history of tools and utilities that they've created for Mint, that the Mint user community have grown to love. So they are distinct, based on the tools and utilities and the default experience around them. But Clem and I, obviously both involved with Mate, and I chat to him on IRC fairly regularly, and there is some cross-pollination of development work. So some of the stuff that I've worked on is now, well, for example, all of the packaging work I do in Debian directly benefits the LMDE versions of Mint. And some of the work I've done upstream on Compiz has been of direct benefit to Linux Mint in the 17.2 release.
Okay. I have a question, and I posted this question to Popey maybe about a year ago, but one of the issues I've had in the past with Linux in general is multimedia apps. Now, on this desktop I use now, this is a gateway. This is where I do most of my production work. I had the previous version of Linux Mint installed. I had Unity. I figured, well, let me try Linux Mint. It ran fine, but I could not get Kdenlive to work properly. And of course, that's what I use for my videos exclusively. I think it's terrific. I wish Windows had something as simple as that, and maybe they do. I don't know. But Martin, I could not get it to work, and I tried hours. Finally, I gave up, and that's when I thought to myself, let me try Ubuntu Mate. I downloaded the specific multimedia apps I needed, and everything works perfectly. So Martin, thank you. It was one of those situations where, do I really want to spend hours trying to fix a problem? I don't give Windows that kind of courtesy. Why should I do it for Linux Mint? I still recommend Linux Mint, but my question is, will we see, and I wish we had, but will we see an exclusive multimedia suite for a specific distribution? For example, the Ubuntu Mate multimedia suite, which includes something like a Kdenlive, a Kazam recorder, or Ubuntu Unity's version, or a Linux Mint, something where you can say this multimedia suite has been tested to work perfectly only in this version of Mate. It may work in Linux Mint or Debian and so on, but something where, as a Windows user, that's the only thing I feel that is missing, an exclusive multimedia suite tested for that specific distro where I will not run into the issue of Kden Live again. And from what I understand, it wasn't just me. It was rather disappointing. That was the deal breaker for me in Linux Mint. The rest of it was fine. But I guess that's my question. Will we see that? And if it's not possible, why not?
You will see something kind of like that in the next version, and I'll explain how that's going to look. So I've been working on a new utility called Ubuntu Mate Welcome, which I'm just going to shorten to Welcome.
Okay.
And you've probably seen on the various distributions, the first time you log in, post install, you get a central window appear, and it says this is the introduction to the operating system, and
Yes.
user forums and all of that sort of stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
So I've taken that idea and expanded on it a little bit and borrowed some ideas from other distributions that I've tested over the years. So there's a getting started section, which is to really help orientate new users with the operating system and help them get the post-installation bits and pieces that they need to get done that they might not know are there. So, for example, it takes you to the install the additional drivers that your machine requires. A button that you click and it takes you to the right thing. Or if you're in Japan or Korea or China, installing complex input methods, and it helps you get your system up to date.
Okay.
The other piece of that is there's a software section, and in there it's a highly curated list of applications that, in my opinion, almost my opinion only, and I'll get to that in a moment, are best in class and integrate very well with Ubuntu Mate.
Mm-hmm.
And in that list of applications, you will find audio editors, video editors, and video capture tools, among a selection of other things. But those are my recommendations.
Okay.
And to be absolutely clear, they're not just my recommendations. I don't know if you're familiar with the name, but Matt Hartley, who used to co-present the Linux Action Show, has been helping me with that. And actually, because what we don't want to do is fill it with lots of applications that do the same thing. So there is, if you have a task to achieve, it recommends, by and large, this is the one application that we recommend you install to do that. And it's not just that it's kind of good, it's what we feel is the best tool for the job that works really well with Ubuntu Mate. And in there you will find a suite of multimedia applications and utilities.
Very nice. It's kind of like you're looking for a perfect marriage of apps and core system where it just works out of the box.
Yeah, and part of the reason for creating this again is feedback from my family. So my father-in-law said to me, "I really like." Well, he really loves Ubuntu Mate, and he says, "Once you've set it up for me, I can do everything I need to do. But if I don't have what I need, I don't quite know how to install it and sort myself out."
Yes.
So the new Ubuntu Mate Welcome is like a virtual me to help my family. So a lot of the applications that are in there are things that my family use. So you might go down that list and you think, why is Sweet Home 3D in here? That's an odd application. Or why is PySol in here? And that's because some of those applications are specifically the ones that my family use.
Okay, but that makes perfect sense.
It's a good selection of stuff, and it's got a lot of common applications that new people to Linux would expect. If they don't know anything about Linux, they would expect to be able to run. So, for example, it's got one-click buttons for installing things like Dropbox and Skype and Google Chrome and Spotify and Pandora. All of these things that people know about, that are front and center in people's consciousness about what they can do with a computer. It's all one-click stuff, all neatly presented. So that's been good. And I've had quite a lot of community involvement with that. So Larry Bushy from the Going Linux podcast has written some new copy for the Welcome and also for the website.
Okay.
And a guy called Ian Holm, who I imagine must be a web developer by profession, has done a whole load of work just recently on Ubuntu Mate Welcome to fancy it up a little bit and make it look a little bit swish. So the next version looks quite smart. What version of Ubuntu Mate are you running at the moment?
The last one, the what, 15
1504.
dots? Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's been backported to 1504, so you can grab it from
Okay.
the PPA and install it and
Okay.
test it, and use it,
Okay.
and
And this
all
is
that stuff.
officially called the welcome.
Yes, yes. So at the the long name is Ubuntu Mate Welcome,
Okay.
but I'm slowly shortening that to just Welcome.
Wonderful. Well, there you go, folks. Extremely user friendly. Click and go. Once again, something to be said about simplicity. Briefly, Martin, why no Ubuntu Software Center in the next version?
Okay. So it's removed from the default install. It
Yes.
doesn't mean that it's not installable. So that's the
Okay.
first thing to be clear about.
Okay.
And the reason I've removed it is because all of the feedback that I'd had up until the point where I removed it was we don't like the Ubuntu Software Center.
Okay.
That's what people's feedback was. People
All right.
felt that it was slow and
Yes.
clunky and that there
Yes.
were better alternatives. And I didn't think that there was a better alternative. There were other tools, but not that do what the Ubuntu Software Center does, which is effectively it's like an app, an app
Yeah.
store
Right.
for Ubuntu.
Yes. Right.
And again, this points to people like my father-in-law who, I want to be able to say, go here, search for this, click the install button. I don't want to be saying, Control Alt T,
Of
sudo
course.
apt-get update, and
That's
go
too
through all of that
much.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I found an alternative. It's proprietary and it's called AppGrid.
Yes. I
Um,
actually tested that a while ago. Very good.
mm.
Yeah.
So I contacted the author of AppGrid because it's proprietary and you have to get the permission to
Yes.
redistribute it.
Yes.
And he's granted me permission to use it. So what I've done is now I've got Ubuntu Mate Welcome that has this facility for installing applications, some of which may be in PPAs or third-party repositories, and it handles all of the PPA setup and configuration all for you without any manual input. I thought, right, I'll remove the Ubuntu Software Center from the default install, and I'll add AppGrid and the Ubuntu Software Center
Mm.
to Ubuntu Mate Welcome. So
Okay.
now you've got this selection of about 30 apps in
Mm.
Welcome,
Okay.
and there's then a button now that says more apps, and if you click that, it says you could use the Ubuntu Mate Software Center or
Oh,
AppGrid to
okay.
discover more, and it's got a one-click option for each of those. So now
Okay.
it's the user's choice, and for the super advanced users that love Synaptic, well, they already know
Right.
about
Right.
that. They know how to
Yes.
install it, and they can do that and
Right.
be happy that Ubuntu Software Center is no longer on their system.
That sounds reasonable. Sure. Okay.
Well, I thought so. It
Yeah.
caused quite a stink when I announced that, and I didn't realise it until a few days later
What?
that it had been circulated just about
Yeah.
everywhere. So I was kind of shocked to learn that this simple change that I'd made just resonated all around the place, and I was completely oblivious because I was busy doing other things.
Of course. Yeah. Well, Martin, it sounds like that the future of Mate looks pretty promising, wouldn't you say?
I hope so. Yes. I mean,
Well, I'll
it's
make
just
sure of
been,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, it's been wonderful. It's like I said, the only issue I had was the syncing of my phone, my smartphone. That's pretty much been it. My multimedia apps work, which is what I use in post-production. As you well know, it's very important to have stable tools, and
Yeah.
I definitely recommend it. It's one of the best, and this is coming from a Windows dual booter, folks. So there you go. Definitely check it out. So,
Well, thank you
Martin,
for your kind words.
yeah. Okay. Finally, Martin, let's see if we can quell a bit of controversy. Ubuntu, Mate,
Okay.
or Mate. Now, I propose, okay, and you can probably say no, but I proposed we call it Ubuntu Cheeseburger because how do you pronounce cheeseburger? It's not cheese a burger or cheese bourgeois. It's cheeseburger. That would quell any controversy. What's not? I know you're going to say no, and that's fine, folks. I tried. He's being completely unreasonable. No, I'm just joking, of course. Okay, if you if you would, and somebody said I'm all for it, but no. If you would please, how do you pronounce pronounce Ubuntu Mate, and why?
Right. Okay. Well, I'm not a Spanish speaker, or I speak enough Spanish to order drinks in a bar. That's the extent of it. But it is pronounced mate, as if you were ordering a latte. So
Ah,
that's the pronunciation. So I'm reliably informed. And the origins of the name are when GNOME 2 was forked into the Mate desktop. That work was done by a guy going by the name of Perberos, who was from Argentina, and they were an Arch Linux user when they did that forking. And to fork GNOME 2 in such a way that the libraries and the applications didn't conflict with GNOME, everything had to be renamed. So all of the desktop and the utilities all got new names, and they are all Spanish in origin. So
ah,
mate comes from the yerba mate. It's a species of holly native to subtropical South America, and they use the leaves to make a caffeinated beverage, or an infusion, a tea-like infusion, and that's called mate.
okay.
And Perbros from Argentina called it mate, and that's where the main name comes from. And then things like gedit was renamed to Pluma,
Okay.
and Pluma in Spanish means quill. So you can see there's some,
Hmm.
and Evince, the PDF viewer, was
Yes.
renamed to Atril, and Atril in Spanish means lectern. So
Hmm.
there is some meaning behind the names if you speak Spanish. So
Okay.
that's why everything got renamed, and it is pronounced mate. So you could say
Hmm.
you like
Oh,
to enjoy your mate with a
ah,
nice mug of latte.
latte, of course. I hope folks were taking notes. There'll be a quiz next week. No, just kidding. Well, there you go, straight from the horse's mouth, as it were, folks, as it were. It is pronounced mate, and I think that's what I saw on the website. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I'll say mate but it is pronounced correctly,
I
mate.
don't particularly mind. I mean, I know
Yeah,
that there's some Australian guys using it, and they call it, Ubuntu Mate, which I think is
right.
quite, because it
Yeah,
suits their
friendly. Hey,
accent.
mate, how are you?
Yeah,
Sure, sure.
yeah.
And there's
And
nothing.
the logo for Ubuntu Mate was designed by Sam Hewitt,
Hmm.
and he took the Ubuntu logo and the Mate logo and used elements of both to make the Ubuntu Mate logo. And he actually referred to that logo as the Circle of Mates, as opposed to Ubuntu's
Ah,
Circle of Friends logo.
I see.
So you can have some fun with the mispronunciation as well.
Of
So
course.
I don't mind. Ubuntu
Darn,
Mate, Ubuntu Mate.
I was hoping for a Ubuntu cheeseburger. Darn it. Just
Yeah,
joking. I'm just joking.
I
But
haven't
at
I
least
haven't
that.
got time to
Yeah.
make that distribution.
Well, Martin, this was a pleasure. That explains a lot of things. Finally, we can quell the controversy. And it's okay to call it mate. It's okay. I
Yeah.
sometimes say it either way. It just all depends what kind of mood I'm. But both is okay. This is all about the hard work that is involved in a terrific operating system called Mate or Mate. Martin, thank you very much. Let's see, what else do I have? I think this includes this wonderful conversation. Martin, if it's okay with you, once I have time, I will provide a free audio download link below in the show notes to this conversation on the archive.org, if that's okay with you.
Yep, that's absolutely fine.
It'll be provided free of charge, courtesy of myself and, of course, Martin. We do ask maybe a small donation to the Ubuntu Mate project. Just go to the ubuntu-mate.org, and of course consider supporting this Total OS Today channel. This was completely thoroughly enjoyable. Martin, next time, let's see. Next up would be 15.10, and maybe after that comes out, we can have another conversation then if you want to.
Sure, that'd be lovely.
That sounds terrific. Again, give my regards to Alan Pope. Love to talk to him again soon sometime. I hope he's doing well.
He is. I shall be talking to Alan tomorrow because it's a podcast night for us tomorrow, so we'll be
Ah,
recording a podcast tomorrow.
that's right. Terrific. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy your technology as always, and please don't text and drive. Take care. Peace.